My sister tried to embarrass me at my engagement party. She took the mic and said something she knew would hurt me. The room was full. Everyone was smiling. I thought this night was about love and celebration. My sister and I didn't grow up hating each other. That's the part people always assume when I tell this story. They imagine screaming fights or dramatic fallout, but that wasn't how it started. It started quietly, in ways that were easy to excuse and even easier to ignore. It started with comparison. Constant, unspoken, relentless comparison. From the very beginning, it felt like we were standing on opposite sides of an invisible scoreboard, and she was always checking the numbers. We grew up in Chicago, in a family that valued achievement, education, and appearances. On the outside, we looked like a successful, close-knit family. Inside, everything felt measured. Grades mattered, colleges mattered, careers mattered. And from as early as I can remember, my sister and I were being measured against each other, even when no one said it out loud. Sometimes it came from relatives, sometimes it came from teachers, but most of the time, it came from her. She was competitive by nature. I was quieter. I worked hard, but I didn't announce it. She worked hard too, but she made sure people noticed. When report cards came home, she'd glance at mine before showing hers to our parents. When college applications rolled around, she talked endlessly about rankings and prestige. If I got accepted somewhere good, she'd say it was probably easier for me because I fit the profile. If she got accepted somewhere better, she made sure everyone knew. No matter what I did, it was never enough to simply exist in my own lane. Everything I achieved had to be explained away. If I succeeded, it wasn't because I worked late nights or sacrificed weekends. It was because I was lucky. Or because someone helped me, or because things just worked out for me. She never said those things about herself. When we both moved into adulthood, the comparisons didn't stop. They just changed shape. She went to law school, and it became her entire identity. Long hours, stress, responsibility. She wore it like armor. I chose a different path. I went into social research and started working with an NGO, focusing on community-based studies and policy impact. The work mattered deeply to me. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't come with applause, but it made a difference. To her, that difference didn't count. She called my work meaningful, but always with a tone that suggested it wasn't serious. She'd say things like, "At least you enjoy what you do," whenever someone asked about my job, as if enjoyment was the only thing I had to show for it. She never acknowledged the long hours, the emotional toll, or the intellectual rigor. In her mind, I worked because I wanted to. She worked because she had to. Family gatherings became stages for her to perform on. She talked about cases, deadlines, clients' stress. People listened. They admired her. I admired her too, even when she made me feel small. I never resented her success. I just wanted mine to be respected. Social life became another battlefield. If I went out with friends, she said I was carefree. If I stayed home, she said I didn't have much going on. If I traveled, it was because my job was flexible. If she traveled, it was because she earned it. There was no version of my life that didn't somehow prove her point that things came easier for me. The truth was, I worked just as hard. I just didn't need to compete about it. Then I met my fiancé. That was the moment everything shifted from uncomfortable to hostile. Our relationship didn't look dramatic from the outside. We didn't meet in some big romantic way. We were introduced by mutual friends. We talked, we laughed, we took our time. What we built was quiet, steady, and supportive. For the first time in my life, I felt like I didn't need to prove anything to be loved. I could just be myself. My sister noticed immediately. At first, she masked it as concern. She asked questions that sounded supportive but felt invasive. How serious was it? Was I sure? Was it moving too fast? When she met him, she smiled politely but asked pointed questions about his career and future plans, always circling back to whether he could keep up with me. The implication was clear. Either I was settling, or I was once again being handed something without earning it. She was never happy for me. Not really. She never celebrated milestones without attaching a warning. When I talked about our plans, she'd remind me of how hard relationships were. When I talked about feeling secure, she said I was naive. It felt like she was waiting for it to fall apart so she could say she'd been right all along. When he proposed, I cried. Happy, overwhelming tears. It was one of the most meaningful moments of my life. But almost immediately, my joy was followed by dread, because I knew I had to tell her. I remember staring at my phone before calling her, rehearsing my words like I was delivering bad news instead of sharing happiness. When I finally told her, there was a long pause, too long. Then she said congratulations, but it sounded hollow, like the word didn't quite fit in her mouth. She didn't ask about the proposal. She didn't ask how I felt. She just said, "Wow. That was fast." After that, the tension escalated quickly. She made comments about how marriage was a big step, especially for someone like me. She questioned whether I was ready. She asked if I'd thought it through. She hinted that relationships like mine didn't always last. Each comment landed like a reminder that she didn't see my happiness as something I deserved. Still, I invited her to the engagement party. Part of me hoped that this would be the moment things changed. That seeing us surrounded by love would soften her, that she'd finally accept that my life wasn't a competition she needed to win. The other part of me knew better, but I wasn't ready to admit it yet. The engagement party was held in Chicago, in a cozy event space filled with warm lights and familiar faces. Friends, family, people who had supported us from the beginning. When I walked in that night, I felt light. For once, I wasn't thinking about comparisons or expectations. I was just happy. My sister arrived late, as usual. She walked in confidently, perfectly dressed, scanning the room like she was assessing it. When she hugged me, it felt stiff and obligatory. She barely acknowledged my fiancé. I noticed it, but I told myself not to let it matter. I didn't want her presence to steal my joy. As the evening went on, I relaxed. People laughed. Conversations flowed. My fiancé gave a short speech, thanking everyone and talking about how excited he was for our future. I felt emotional listening to him. This was real. This was happening. Then my sister stood up. At first, I assumed she was going to say something polite, maybe even supportive. She walked toward the microphone with confidence, heels clicking against the floor. People turned toward her, smiling, expecting something heartfelt. After all, she was my sister. She picked up the microphone and tapped it lightly. The room quieted. I felt a strange tightening in my chest, a warning I'd ignored too many times before. My fiancé squeezed my hand, and I squeezed back, trying to steady myself. She looked directly at me. She smiled. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about love or celebration. It was about control. It was about proving something. It was about settling a rivalry that had never really ended. She leaned into the microphone, and the room went silent. The room stayed quiet for a beat longer than it should have. That kind of silence where people stop breathing at the same time, where laughter disappears instantly and curiosity turns into unease. My sister held the microphone like she was comfortable with the attention, like this was exactly where she wanted to be. I felt my fiancé's hand tighten around mine, but my eyes were locked on her face. I'd seen that look before. The controlled smile, the calm confidence that always showed up right before she said something sharp. She started by laughing lightly, as if she was about to tell a harmless story. She thanked everyone for coming and said how nice it was to see so many people celebrating. Her tone was sweet, almost convincing. A few people smiled, relaxing again, thinking whatever tension they'd sensed was just nerves. I didn't relax. Something in my chest told me to brace myself. Then she turned her head slightly toward me, still smiling, and said my name. She talked about how we'd grown up together in Chicago, how people always compared us, how everyone always thought we were so different. A few guests chuckled politely. She said it was funny how life worked out, how some people struggled, and some people just seemed to have things fall into place. I felt my stomach drop, because I knew exactly who she was talking about. She said she admired my luck. That word hit hard. She repeated it more than once, each time with a little laugh, like it was an inside joke. She talked about how I'd managed to land a great relationship while focusing on meaningful work, how some people didn't have to sacrifice the way others did. The room started to shift, smiles faded, people exchanged glances. They were starting to realize this wasn't a compliment. My fiancé squeezed my hand again, harder this time. I could feel my face burning, my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted to interrupt her. I wanted to stand up and take the microphone away. But I froze. Years of staying quiet, of not escalating, of letting things slide, held me in place. She went on, talking about commitment and responsibility, about how marriage wasn't something to rush into. She said it took discipline and maturity. Then she looked straight at me and said, "But I guess when things come easy, you don't really learn that part." The room went dead silent. I heard someone gasp softly. Someone else cleared their throat. My sister kept talking, her voice steady, her posture relaxed, like she'd practiced this. She said she hoped I understood how serious marriage was. She said she hoped I was ready. She said she just wanted to say what everyone was thinking. That's when my fiancé let go of my hand. He stood up. The movement was sudden enough that it startled people nearby. My sister stopped mid-sentence, clearly not expecting that. He walked toward her calmly, but there was nothing calm about his eyes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He just said her name and asked her to stop. His tone was firm in a way I'd never heard before. She laughed again, nervously this time, and said she was just being honest. He told her this wasn't honesty. This was cruelty. He told her this night wasn't about her opinions or her resentment. It was about us. And if she couldn't respect that, she needed to sit down. For a moment, I thought she might actually back off. Instead, she snapped. Her face changed completely. The smile disappeared, replaced by something raw and angry. She accused him of turning me against her. She said he didn't understand our family. She said I'd always needed someone to defend me. Every word felt like it was meant to cut me down in front of everyone I loved. That's when I found my voice. I stood up too, my legs shaking but my mind clear for the first time all night. I told her to stop. I told her she didn't get to rewrite my life into something convenient for her jealousy. I told her nothing had ever been handed to me, and I was done pretending otherwise to keep her comfortable. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. I told her I worked hard. I told her I'd earned my place in my career, in my relationship, in my life. I told her her jealousy didn't make my achievements less real. The room stayed silent, but it wasn't tense anymore. It felt focused, like everyone was finally seeing what I'd been living with for years. She started crying then, loudly, dramatically, saying she was being attacked. She said she was just trying to protect me. She said she was tired of always being compared. The irony of that almost made me laugh. Instead, I told her calmly that the comparisons came from her, that I'd never asked to be part of this rivalry, that I just wanted a sister. That broke something in her. She dropped the microphone and stormed out of the room, pushing past people without looking back. The door slammed behind her, echoing through the space. No one followed. No one chased after her. People stood there, stunned, processing what they'd just witnessed. For a moment, I worried the night was ruined beyond repair. Then something unexpected happened. Someone started clapping, slowly at first, then someone else joined in, then more. It wasn't loud or celebratory, it felt supportive, grounding. People came up to me, hugging me, telling me they were sorry, telling me they were proud of me for standing up for myself. I felt overwhelmed in a different way now, like a weight I'd been carrying for years had finally shifted. The rest of the night wasn't perfect, but it was real. Conversations resumed. Music played softly again. I stayed close to my fiancé, grateful beyond words for how he'd stepped in without hesitation. That meant more to me than any speech ever could. My sister didn't contact me for days after that, then weeks. Family members reached out, some cautiously, some openly taking sides. A few suggested I should apologize to keep the peace. I told them no. For once, I didn't feel guilty about it. When she finally called, her tone was cold. She said she felt humiliated. She said I'd embarrassed her. I told her she embarrassed herself. I told her I wasn't interested in continuing a relationship built on competition and resentment. I told her I loved her, but I wouldn't accept being diminished anymore. She accused me of choosing my fiancé over her. I told her I was choosing myself. That conversation ended without resolution. And strangely, I felt okay with that. In the months leading up to the wedding, we kept our distance. I didn't share details. I didn't invite her into planning. I focused on building a future that felt healthy, peaceful, safe. I realized how much energy I'd spent managing her emotions, adjusting myself to avoid triggering her insecurities. Letting that go felt like breathing fresh air. She did attend the wedding. Quietly, she didn't make a scene. She congratulated us politely and kept her distance. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. It was enough. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what happened at the engagement party, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The answer is no, because that night forced the truth into the open. It showed me that love doesn't mean shrinking yourself to make someone else feel bigger. I still believe siblings can heal. I still hope one day my sister will look at me without seeing a rival. But that hope no longer comes at the cost of my self-worth. That night taught me something important. The hardest boundaries to set are the ones with the people who have known you your whole life. But they're also the most necessary. The room was full. Everyone was smiling. I thought that night was about love and celebration. It was, just not in the way I expected. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it. Your support helps real stories like this reach the people who need them most.